and welcome to Your Coaching Journey, a podcast for doctors about coaching. Whether you're a coaching doctor, a doctor who is learning to coach, or a doctor who would like to build coaching into your professional life, then this is the podcast for you. Hi, I'm Helen Leathers, and with me today is my co-host and business partner, Tom Dillon. Hi, Tom, how are you?
I'm wonderfully well, thank you very much.
Glad
on
to
top
hear it.
form.
Good. We are going to be exploring a model that follows on from last episode on transactional analysis. And what is that model that we'll be exploring today?
Today we are exploring the parent-adult-child model. And as you say, this is a model that comes from transactional analysis. It's probably one of the two models that I use regularly that come from transactional analysis. I always have trouble saying transactional analysis. I don't know what it is about that phrase, but so TA, let's call it TA.
Let's do that.
From now on, it will just be TA. So within TA, we have the parent-adult-child model. We have the drama triangle, which we spoke about on the previous podcast, but we will do an episode just on the drama triangle. But for the moment, on today's episode, we're just going to cover the parent-adult-child model.
And there is a visual in the show notes.
There is a visual in the show notes.
Excellent.
Yeah. But for those of you who don't have access, because, you know, a lot of people go out for a run and listen to us. So if you're out running, this is for you. We have the best way to think about the parent-adult-child model is within a set of traffic lights. So rather than the colours, if we have parent at the top as the top light, then adult in the middle and child above. So PAC. So it's a PAC traffic light model. And so that's, and obviously this is a model that is concerned with interaction. So the transaction that forms part of transactional analysis, be careful how I say it, is the transactions between people.
So relationships, social interactions.
Yes. So Eric Byrne was of the idea that each time we come into contact with someone else, there is some form of transaction going on that we will want our needs met, they will want their needs met. Hopefully somewhere along the line someone gets their needs met. But there is that sort of transaction happening all the time. It's an odd way to look at life as a transaction, but I think there is something in it that is worth exploring. So if you think of the traffic light model as being parent, adult, child, we need another traffic light for it to communicate with. So alongside it, if you imagine two alongside, side by side, two traffic lights staring at you, both with parent, adult, child in, and then it's how the two interact. So the parent might be talking to the parent, the adult might be talking to the adult, the child might be talking to the child, but then the parent might be talking to the child, the adult might be talking to the adult. So that's kind of the way it's set up. Okay. And within organisations and within most relationships, I think what we're aiming for the most part, is adult-to-adult communication.
So we are currently two sets of traffic lights talking to each other.
Yes.
And we're on our amber light.
No, there's no colour. It's just parent, adult, child. We've got rid of the colours.
I'm just using amber to explain that we're on the middle light, adult to adult, although you might just have gone into parent mode just then.
I might have, yeah.
Yes.
There is no amber. So yes, I think that's a good way to think about it. So you and I, for the most part, during our podcasts, have adult-to-adult conversations. There's very little reason for us to stray. Having said that, I strayed. In a very light way. So, yes, I know that's a good way to think about it. So, now, obviously, as we've just discovered, it's not always the case that adult-to-adult communication is happening. And there will be times when we will stray into one of the other modes. Now, these, as we covered in the last podcast, these ego states, that's what we're talking about here, are things that we learned in our childhood. So the parent ego state, so the parent in the model, the parent ego state is what we saw in our parents and other caregivers, other significant adults in our life. We saw them behave in a certain way. And that gave us our model of what the parent ego state looks like. So we will have seen controlling parents where there are rules and you follow the rules. You don't talk about amber when... So we don't follow the rule. We follow the rules. There are rules, you follow the rules. If you don't follow the rules, there are consequences. So that's a controlling parent. And obviously, as a parent, you want to have some control over children. They need to be kept in check, because otherwise they do dangerous things. They might run across the road, and we need some rules about that. So we're not saying that rules as parents are bad things. But as a child, we don't know what's going on, do we? We're just learning all of this from our parents. So we're taking that, okay, there's some rules there, and I have to follow the rules. So the parent is the one providing the rules. But at the same time, our parent is also doing a lot of nurturing. So the parent state is kind of split between controlling parent and nurturing parent. And the nurturing parent will be doing all there, I'll look after you, all that sort of nurturing stuff, picking us up when we fall down and all of that, tying our shoelaces when we're little. We stop doing that eventually, but that sort of thing, the nurturing parent. So we will learn that as children growing up. And obviously we have a long time. We've got, I don't know, depending on when you leave home, but let's say you leave home, go to university, you've had 18 years of being subjected to those role models and almost conditioned to, okay, that's what parents are like, and that's how you behave as an adult in that way. Obviously, as a child, we're taking all this in and we are responding to that. We're having to navigate that space. So if we have a family home and we've got a controlling parent and a nurturing parent, let's say we've got one of each, we will adapt our way of being around the controlling parent. It might be different to how we are around the nurturing parent. So we will learn to navigate that space, and we will learn what gets rewarded from one parent and what gets rewarded from the other. So we'll become quite adept at getting what we need as a child from each of those parents and staying safe as a child with each of those parents. So we'll learn how to be. So when we go down to the child in the traffic light model, so that's the bottom ego state, we have the adapted child, which knows the rules. So it's learned there are some rules in this household and I have to follow the rules, otherwise things happen. I'm in trouble. So we'd learn to follow the rules. Now, there are times when there are no rules. So if we're out playing with our friends or just the parents aren't around, we might well be in free child. There might be times with our parents when we're in free child, but we might be playing around with them, horsing around with them.
I think I see the free child in you a lot when you're with your grandchildren.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you're having fun.
They will have, yeah. I'm not sure what parent role model I provide for my grandchildren. But yes, no, you're right. There will be times when we're in free child. So we learn that. We learn how to be a free child. But obviously there are times when we have controls placed upon us and we become an adapted child. If we have a temperament that doesn't like following the rules all of the time, that adapted child gets split out and it becomes a rebellious child.
Oh, I see that in you too.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I'd be disappointed if you didn't. So we know the rules. So we're still in that adapted space that we know the rules, but we're choosing not to follow the rules and we rebel. And I guess most teenagers get to that point, don't they, where they, to some extent, rebel against the rules that are being laid down by the parents. So that rebellious. I don't think that's unusual for the rebellious child to start to surface at some point.
Sometimes I see the rebellious child in you and your grandson becoming the parent.
Yeah, that's true as well. Yeah. So that's the parent-adult-child model. It's a traffic light model, and as I say, really it comes into its own when you've got two traffic lights and they're talking to one another. That's where you can see the interactions playing out. But that background of, okay, these are ego states that we will go into as adults during a conversation. I mean, it might be we're on our own just thinking about a situation and we'll go into I'm going to have words with them. We might go into that controlling parent. So we don't necessarily have to be communicating with someone at the time, but that's probably the most obvious, the most demonstrable way it's going to show up.
Okay, interesting.
So I think if we think about organisation, maybe the workplace is a sort of a safer place to talk about it. I think we will have perhaps stereotypical role models of the boss. Certainly in previous generations, perhaps a command and control leadership style, which is the controlling parent.
Yes.
It's like you do what I say, otherwise you're out the door. That's a controlling parent, leadership style, command and control. I think most leadership theories these days would suggest that's not a good way to be, that most forward-thinking leadership teaching is different to that. And there is a combination of sort of nurturing and asking people what they think, a bit more of a coaching style of leadership. But I think inevitably within any organisation you are going to come across some people who have that controlling style, and I think it's useful to think about the controlling parent as their style, if that's how they show up.
So if someone is showing up in that controlling parent style at work, for example, what impact does that then have on the people that work for them?
Well, if you treat people like children, they tend to behave like children. So if you've got a controlling parent style, then I think your interactions might be, if we imagine those two traffic lights, you're coming from the top parent traffic light, talking to the bottom child traffic light, and that conversation can carry on time and time again. And within TA terms, that's considered to be a complementary transaction. And that can go on for a lifetime. So if you think about a marriage where you've got someone who's a controlling parent, that's their style, and then someone that perhaps shows up in the relationship as an adapted child of, okay, no, that's fine, you make the rules, I'll just do what you want to do. And that could go on for a lifetime. I think I saw a lot of that in my mum and dad, that my dad was generally the controlling parent. We tended to do what he wanted to do. You know, we'd go on a holiday, seaside holiday, we'd end up in a tank museum because that's what my dad wanted to do. Like, no one else was interested in tanks, but he thought that would be a good place to go. So he tended to make the rules, and my mum generally would be that sort of adapted child of going along with it. Occasionally she'd be the rebellious child, but that went on for a lifetime till he died. And then I think there was a certain amount of release for her of, that's done then. So no, but I think that's true. I did see in her, I mean, she loved him dearly and was grief-stricken, but I think there was also that release in her that, okay, now I can be me. So I think it is something that can go on for a lifetime, and obviously that's not healthy. And if you think about organisations and you've got a boss and a secretary, perhaps that, or an assistant, that could be, okay, I make the rules, you do what I ask you to do, and that's the way it works. So I think that's perfectly possible. And say, as long as everyone follows the rules, it will work. But it's not healthy.
And not ideal. So ideally we want to be adult to adult.
Adult to adult. And I think we have the same thing showing up. So I think more often than not, I think if I think about how often the controlling parent shows up in the coaching room, it's less than the nurturing. The majority of the time when people have this sort of issue showing up for them, it's the nurturing parent that shows up.
So how would we recognise that in the coaching room?
They tend to come saying, I'm overwhelmed, I've got far too much to do. People aren't capable of doing their jobs, but I'm having to do their jobs for them. I've got all these people working for me, but they don't do it. I have to do all their work for them. Now, that is the nurturing parent. So when they've got someone in their team who isn't doing their work, they do it for them. And they become overwhelmed. So that's, I think, a big problem. And I think, I certainly had someone that I was coaching where they had a lady in their team that showed up at least once a week in tears in their office. And they go, this is happening, I can't cope with this. And what would happen, the person I was coaching, she would do her nurturing parent thing. Oh, don't worry, leave it with me, I'll sort it out. And that would be a regular pattern of behaviour. So she was being the nurturing parent. The person in her team was being the child, couldn't cope with everything, going to the nurturing parent, knowing that she would step in.
So a bit like the psychological games that we were talking about in our previous episode.
No, I'm not. I mean, I did ask this coachee, to what extent do you think she's using this as a strategy to get out of doing the work? And she said, no, she wouldn't do that. It's no. But what was interesting, when the person I was coaching got moved into a different role for a time, so she was seconded to a different post. So someone came in and did her role for her. She was a lady from Germany who was very no nonsense, very straight on a controlling parent, I would suggest, or maybe just an adult. But she certainly wasn't being the nurturing parent, so she just didn't put up with that stuff. So when maybe the first time this lady turned up in her office crying, she said, "Well, okay, well, but you need to get on with it, crack on." And so she realised that wasn't going to work, so never did it again. So she just didn't turn up crying about her role. She just got on with it, and had a much healthier relationship with the new boss because it was adult to adult. They just talked about stuff, it got sorted, and she moved on. So I think that's what I tend to see more in the coaching room, that people will turn up and say, I've got this problem in my team and I'm doing all of this. And so it's just perhaps having some boundaries and actually thinking about it as an adult and communicating with the other person as an adult and going, okay, how do we solve this together? Rather than, okay, leave it with me, I'll solve it. Because that's disempowering for everyone, isn't it?
Yeah. So in the coaching room, in this scenario, you would share this model with them to gain some perspective?
Yeah. So I would, if I was face-to-face with someone, I would just draw 6 circles. So to draw the 2 sets of traffic lights. And then I would just draw lines between them and say, okay, ideally, we're looking for this adult-to-adult communication going on. What do you think's going on in this scenario? And most people will see it. If they're the nurturing parent, they will go, yeah, that's me. I'm just, but I am nurturing. that's who I am, which is fine up to a point, but not if you're overwhelmed because you're taking on everyone else's work. If you're the controlling parent, I think again you'll see it. You'll go, yeah, I'm doing that thing, aren't I? I'm being the parent. Yeah, I need what I'm looking for is them to step up to being an adult. Now you might get some controlling parents who go, well, I have to do that because they're kids and they can't do anything. I had once. I was doing some work with a firm, and this I was amazed. This director of this firm was talking about this. I was really talking about a coaching approach of treating people as adults and having adult conversations. And he said, I can't do that. I can't do that with the people who work for me. He said, they're only one step up from the dog queue. Okay, am I going to... And but he had that approach to his employees, that they weren't capable of conscious thought, that he had to tell them everything they needed to do, which wasn't true. And I think we did some work. I don't think he ever bought into it totally, but he just had that approach. I say it's disempowering for people. If you treat them like children, they will end up behaving like children. Whereas if you start to have adult-to-adult conversations, you just have much better dialogue.
And give them that autonomy to take their role and to move into that adult space. Yeah. Can I just circle back to something that you said earlier?
Of course.
You said you would introduce this model, and I think you said something really important, but we went through it quite quickly, so I just wanted to bring it up again, that you ask the coachee, how do you see your situation in relation to this model? Yeah. And I think that's really important, because we always talk about being, non-directional, and what we don't want to be doing is going into controlling parent or even nurturing parent and saying, I think your situation is this. So we're drawing out the model, but we're not drawing out their situation. We're asking them for how they now see it, given their new knowledge.
Yes, and obviously, to a certain extent, if we're hearing their story, and in our heads we're thinking, yeah, I can see what's going on here. By drawing out the model, I guess to some extent we're being directed. We've got a hypothesis of what's going on, and we're testing that hypothesis by drawing it out and saying, okay, where do you see yourself? Where do you see yourself? Where do you see them on this model? We're testing that hypothesis, aren't we? And hopefully they're going to see it
and recognise
that where they are on it.
Yeah. So I just wanted to come back to that and just clarify.
So I'm not saying, well, you're being a controlling parent, aren't you? Well, of course you've got all the work because you're a nurturing parent. Stop doing that. That's not what we're doing. We're going, okay, we're trying to raise their awareness. We're trying to generate new thinking. That's all the time in my coaching. I'm trying to generate new thinking. And I think sharing this model allows them to see it from a different perspective. And they can look in and go, oh, yeah, I'm doing that thing. And then I think it is interesting to explore where that comes from. So where have you learnt that? That's how you behave as an adult in a situation of responsibility, that's how you conduct yourself. And it could be that they had a controlling parent growing up, or they had a very authoritarian teacher or headmaster or something. There will be someone somewhere where they've learned that style of behaviour from.
Or perhaps they're modelling their first boss.
Could be. But more likely, as we said before, this is all, the transactional analysis stuff is the things that we've taken from our childhood. So we've had 18 years of conditioning of being around the same adults. So we will have learnt a lot from them, and it will have gone into our unconscious being, and we won't even know. We'll just show up like that. Whereas if it's the first boss, you might look at your first boss and think, oh yeah, well, he got his way, so that's a good way to be. So you might consciously go, oh well, that's a good way to be as a boss. But I think all of this other stuff is less in our conscious awareness. It's just that's what we learnt as children. So the both parent states are what we saw modelled as those adult figures, but
when
what
we
we
were
saw
small.
as and we've sort of dragged that through with us into our adult world. And the child ego state is how we learnt to navigate that space in that environment, growing up. How do I keep myself safe? How do I get what I want? How do I navigate these strange beings that are parents? Because really, as children, we're not really at that adult to adult level, are we? We are having to do what other people want us to do. So we are definitely one down at that stage. We're not quite okay at that point. So we're all the while as children trying to make ourselves okay. How do I stay okay in this world?
And I suppose if those behaviours keep us safe and we get what we want, that's no surprise that some people carry those behaviours through to adulthood.
Yeah.
But a better way to be, a more mature way to be, would be to find a way to be an adult.
Yes. Yeah, and obviously an adult doesn't mean that you don't have disagreements with people, but as an adult you might well say, okay, I'm going to say no to that, and the reasons I'm saying no are these, which is a very adult way, rather than saying, well, you're not having your way.
I said no because it's no because I say so. Yes.
So yes, I think we can be assertive as an adult without being aggressive in the way that a controlling parent might be. Well, it's my way or the highway. We can definitely do that. And so we don't have to be accommodating in the way that a nurturing parent might be accommodating. I'm going back into conflict styles, aren't I? So I think we can be assertive. We can collaborate with other people as an adult without slipping into one of those roles of, well, that competing role in conflict styles is a controlling parent, or we can be accommodating like a nurturing parent. So I think, the more that we can stay in that adult space, whether it's in our personal relationships or whether it's in our workplace, I think we will do far better by trying to maintain those relationships. Now, maybe as a coach, as a colleague to someone else, you greet someone and you meet them where they are and they are in a child state. They're coming to you and say, oh, this is a horrible situation. I can't do anything about this. I'm helpless in this situation. That could be the case. And you might have to be the nurturing parent initially in your first interaction and make comforting sounds and, okay, well, we'll work through it together. We'll sort it out to raise them to then be an adult. But we're going to ask them really good questions as a coach that raises them up into that adult state. Because in the coaching room, we don't want to be having a parent-to-child conversation, either controlling or nurturing. We want to have adult-to-adult conversations throughout our coaching.
And coaching is designed to do that, isn't it? It's designed to encourage that autonomy in the coachee and to allow them to feel empowered to be the adult, to make those decisions, to explore their thinking, rather than be told what their thinking is.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have 3 ego states, which have been broken down a little bit. We've got the 2-parent, the 3-child. How else might they work together? Might they play together?
Yeah, so we've talked about those complementary transactions where we've perhaps got parent talking to child talking to parent. They can go on forever. Obviously, we've talked about wanting to get to that adult-to-adult space of having good conversations. It might be that parent talks to parent. So if you've got two controlling parents, they might be discussing someone else, going, well, she's a nightmare, she is, we need to tell her what to do. So you might have two controlling parents collaborating against someone else. So that's perfectly possible. You might have children, if the boss is away for a week, it might be, we could bring a TV and we'll watch the football whilst he's away. That could be a child, sort of rebellious child state to be in. Or it could be free child of, let's just go to the pub, we don't need to work. That could be two child ego states talking. So those are ways that they might play out. We might have crossed transactions where you might have two controlling parents talking to each other, but talking down to them each other as though they are children. So you've got perhaps someone who said, well, it's my way or the highway, and the other person saying, well, don't you talk to me like that, or I'll go to HR.
I can't imagine that's going to work out well.
Well, so that's called a cross transaction,
right.
And that's either going to end up in someone slamming a door or someone punching someone, or it's not going to end well, and it's not sustainable over time. We talked about complementary transactions being sustainable, and you can stay in that relationship forever. But with a cross transaction, it's likely to end quite quickly. It's not going to be sustainable. So I think we're not, I suppose where we might see that in the coaching room is if we have someone that's come in and something dramatic has happened. That tends to be the result of a cross transaction. But more often than not within the coaching room, we'll see the complementary transactions being played out in some way. And people will come and say, well, this is happening and I don't really understand it. And it might be that they're coming from a controlling parent and can't understand why people aren't very happy with their style. They might have had 360 feedback where people said, he's got a strange communication style, which might just mean he's a bit aggressive in the way he talks to people. It might be that we get to that point where someone is just overwhelmed, they've got too much to do, and we recognise that they're being a nurturing parent and they're taking on all the work, and they're really lovely to everyone. Everyone loves that. Everyone thinks they're a great leader because they do all the work. So I think those are the normal ways that we'll see it. So I think it's a really useful model to, when you're having a conversation with someone in the coaching room, they're explaining a situation, if you can recognise that what seems to be going on in the relationship is not adult-to-adult communication, just being able to draw this model out. If you're online, we've got a PDF image of this, so you could just show people the PDF image and say, okay, this is a model of relational interactions. In this context, where do you think people are on this model? And just get them to point to where they think they are. And people get it. So I think it's really useful just to increase people's awareness, get them to do some new thinking about how they might manage that relationship in the future. They might decide, if they're a controlling parent, they might decide, well, it works for me. I don't care whether they're unhappy or not. They could. I have that. Some years ago, I had someone who, I don't know why I'm laughing, it's not funny. So he'd been offered he's on the leadership program, he'd been offered a 360. The 360 feedback had come back and they'd said, yeah, he's quite an aggressive style. He needs to soften his style. Lots of people had commented on his style of leadership. Maybe it's time to step back and not be quite so demanding and all of this stuff. And his response was, yeah, I know why they've said it. I know who said it. And they're wrong. And it was just no, I'm not having it. So I really didn't see it. And I see him posted on LinkedIn from time to time. And I think, no, you've not changed. That was probably 10 years ago. And he's still got the same style. And kind of made aware of his style, but still it works for him. So going back to what we were saying, we learn as children what works. That might have been something deeply embedded for him that, okay, you have to be assertive, aggressive in order to get on. That's how you have to be. And it might be that he's just carried that through, and that would take a lot of unpicking to get past that. Certainly, a 90-minute coaching session around his 360 wasn't going to unravel all of that. But on the whole, I think it is a really useful model to be able to bring to people's attention, get them to take a look at it and see where they are on it and see how they might change that dynamic so that they can perhaps have more adult-to-adult conversations with the people they're working with.
Brilliant.
Well, thank you, Helen. Really enjoyed that. That's been a bit of a deep dive into an aspect of transactional analysis that we touched on in the last episode, but I think that's brought it more to life.
Absolutely.
There are more models and approaches within transactional analysis that we can explore in future podcasts. But for now, we'll wrap that one up. And next time, we will be here talking about relationships, which obviously ties very much into transactional analysis, but it's a topic in its own right. So it's that what people might turn up to coaching to discuss. It's something they bring to coaching. So we'll do that next time. So thank you, Helen.
Look forward to it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
This has been a Monkey Pants Productions podcast.